Hello my fellow devil hunters. This video today will be a guide focusing on one of my favorite boss fights in the entire game, which is the M19 Vergil boss fight. Before we begin, let me try to lay out the general goals and directions for this guide. This guide is aimed towards helping newer players that are having difficulties in figuring out this boss fight. As Vergil has a high defense capability and aggression, especially in the second half of the fight, players new to the series or to the higher difficulties may find it hard to figure out the viable approaches to counter Vergil. The video will mainly focus on showcasing and explaining a few selected strategies against boss Vergil. These strategies and skills are mostly what I believe to be suitable references for less experienced players, usually being either the safest approach, or being efficient in handling the situation, or just being the easiest method to execute. For the sake of a better understanding, I will also try my best to lay out the attack combos and patterns that Vergil uses, then highlight the more difficult spots of the fight, so as to better explain the tips and strategies against them. Keep in mind that this guide will be based entirely on the DMD version of the fight, also assuming that you have purchased all skills and upgrades for Dante. I will try my best to mention skills and weapons using the official names that are used in-game, so you could reference to the skill menu on what I'm talking about if you have no idea. Lastly, I would like to address the topic of Royal Guard and where it stands within this guide video. While technically speaking, Royal Guard can counter most if not all of Vergil's attacks in this boss fight, some of those timings require significant time and practice, which is why in this video I will limit my recommendations for using Royal Guard only to a few selected situations, where safety techniques like jump guarding can be applied. With all of that said, let's get right into it. To keep this already lengthy video shorter, I will first sum up all the possible attacks and combos that boss Vergil has in each phase using a simple list. Then I will proceed to talk about the main goals of each phase and difficult spots that players are most likely to struggle with, suggesting skills and strategies surrounding them. Phase 1 is essentially your warm-up phase. Vergil's attacks are relatively slow and disconnected, only attacking with one skill at a time, and often will keep his distance and just shoot individual summoned swords at you. This phase is a chance for you to get prepared for what's to come. I would suggest players to gather as much resources as possible, namely the DT and SDD gauge, as well as the Royal Guard gauge, if you can Royal Guard. To quickly gain some DT gauge, you could either do parries, Royal Guard, or taunts, and of course all three together if possible. First, for parrying, the best attack to practice parrying against will be Vergil's Rising Star. As to the specific skills and weapons that are good for parrying this attack, you could either use Dance Macabre from Devil Sword Dante, Balrog's Flint's Will using Kick Mode, or King Cerberus' Ice Age. Within these three recommended skills, Dance Macabre and Ice Age both require a back-forward input, which might prove difficult if you're not used to it. Balrog's Flint Will, out of all three, would be the easier one to execute, and it provides a nice little amount of iframes and backwards movement, allowing you to get out into safety even if you miss the timing for parrying. As for Royal Guard, most attacks in Phase 1 are pretty good practice targets, especially the 4 summoned swords, Judgment Cut, and Rising Star. The only situation where I would advise against trying to perfect block everything are Combo A and Combo B. As the two combos have an identical beginning 2 hits, it is quite difficult to anticipate the right timing to do perfect blocks on the 3rd to 5th attacks. Perfect blocking only the first 2 hits would be my advice for those that aren't particularly into practicing Royal Guard. Lastly, Air Taunt is a nice and quick style and DT boost. It also has other practical uses later on in the fight, so it is best to get used to doing it. One final tip for this phase is to carefully time your final attack before the damage crosses the threshold which triggers phase 2. The exact threshold for phase 2 can be spotted on the health bar. If you use this big nub in the middle as a reference point, the threshold to triggering phase 2 is right around here at about the second nub. Barely touching the second nub will trigger phase 2, so it is best to adjust your damage to roughly about the middle point of the second and third nub, so that you can deal maximum damage with your final attack before entering phase 2, practically shortening the time you need to deal with phase 2. Best scenario is to end your last combo with a full gauge release or royal release, which will drastically shorten the time stuck in phase 2. Phase 2 begins with Vergil entering into STT mode. Vergil during phase 2 is very aggressive in comparison to phase 1. He also has hyper armor and a slight regenerative abilities, allowing him to recover HP ever so slightly through time. While it isn't impossible to parry or interrupt STT Vergil, you only get a quick flinch most of the time, making it very impractical to try to interrupt or hurt him during this phase. So overall, my advice for this phase is to first go on the defensive until Vergil's STT runs out, which is why in this coming session I'm going to focus on sharing skills and tactics that will keep Dante safe from Vergil's attacks. A great way to nullify the summoned swords, especially storm swords, those that will surround Dante, is to keep Balrog as your melee weapon, as simply jumping with Balrog can turn into an attack that can destroy summoned swords. Another decent option is to use King Cerberus. The skill Ice Age could destroy summoned swords as well and protect you from most of Vergil's attacks. As to dealing with spiral swords that surrounds Vergil, I would recommend the shotgun Coyote A. Usually a single blast from close to mid-range would remove most if not all of the swords. Another important fact to keep in mind is that Boss Vergil's judgment cuts are actually restrained in terms of height. When Dante is roughly above double jump height, the judgment cuts cannot actually reach you, which means going straight up into the air is a great defensive option. Of course, the simplest way is to just double jump, or you can get close to Vergil and use Trickster's Mustang to get up in the air, or if Vergil is also in the air, you can trick or jump towards him and then step on him using enemy step. Combining that with some air taunts or dashes to extend air time, and you have a great way to escape judgment cuts. As for Royal Guard, Vergil's downward strike aerial cleave is a great target for using jump guarding and release. By jumping, Dante will connect his hitbox with the attack safely with the iframes from the jump. Then by immediately pressing the guard button, you can easily get a perfect block. Since aerial cleave is a vertical downward attack, jump guarding is very easy to connect, and the jump itself will ensure your safety even if you miss the block. When you're comfortable enough with jump guarding this attack, try switching to jump release, especially on the third strike, which could help destroy the storm swords surrounding you. Against the rest of his attacks, I would recommend players avoiding them using the Trickster moveset instead of Royal Guard. Trickster Dash is simple enough that there really isn't much to add, but I would like to remind players that you could also dodge into Vergil with the help of Mustang. Mustang's extra height is especially helpful in the aforementioned tactic against judgment cuts. After escaping his attacks for a while, Vergil will eventually start his ultimate attack, which I'll just nickname it the Dive Bomb from now on. There will be a total of 3 dives, along with 2 storm swords mixed in between. To avoid the dive, simply jumping into the air will do the trick, and having Balrog equipped during the jump will dispatch the summoned sword as well. If you feel like taking more of a high-risk, high-reward approach, you can also try jump guarding this dive bomb. Better yet, you could try releasing the dive bomb, which could take Vergil down from the sky. Since the dive bomb is a horizontal attack, if you miss the timing horribly, you will get hit even with jump guard. So it is best to attempt this in Devil Trigger mode to reduce any potential damage taken if you miss the timing horribly. You could also attempt to jump release when Vergil takes off. While it is a bit more difficult due to the height, this takeoff section does not deal any damage even upon direct contact, so you're totally safe even if you miss the timing. Lastly, you could also bring down Vergil using the 2 rocket launchers, the double Kalina and. The gunslinger skill Mega Cascade could bring down Vergil upon contact. You can start the laser attack as soon as you see Vergil teleporting to the middle of the arena. If you miss that timing, shooting the laser immediately after takeoff would also work. The laser has a huge hitbox that it could also knock out Vergil even if he charges you from the side. But in that case, remember to release the button immediately to not get stuck for too long. Now onto dealing with the JCE, the Judgment Cut End, which Vergil will perform after he finishes his dive bomb attack. Most people's first reaction is to dodge away, which does work, especially on Devil Hunter difficulty, where Vergil gives you plenty of time to escape. But on DMD that timing is pretty tight. While it still can work, there are arguably easier ways to handle it. For the easiest method, you could simply do a regular block in Devil Trigger mode. Royal Guard in Devil Trigger mode will block JCE just like any regular attack, with the expense of roughly 1 DT bar. If you're looking for other options than Royal Guard, Ping Cerberus could also do the job, once again making good use of Ice Age with its long iframes. Either way, after dealing with the JCE, Vergil will be stuck in normal form for a while, and that is your chance to strike. Normal form Vergil in Phase 2 has the following attacks. While a bit easier to handle compared to his SDT form, it is still a significant jump in difficulty comparing to Phase 1. Most if not all of Vergil's attacks are extended, making it harder to catch his vulnerable attack window afterwards. While it is still very much possible to catch Vergil off guard at the end of his combos, the timing for some of these combos gets pretty tight, especially those ending with continuous judgment cuts. To make this easier, there are a few long-reaching attacks that you can use. The best method that I've found so far is to use round trips. Once released, they will attack Vergil separately from Dante. This allows you to focus on dodging Vergil's attacks, while the summoned swords do their work at catching Vergil off guard. This is by far the easiest and safest method that I know of, as long as you remember to prepare round trips beforehand and release them just as or after Vergil starts his attacks. If you missed the timing to prepare round trips, I would recommend that you trick towards Vergil by the end of his attack combo, then use either a Shotgun Blast or Handbreaker to catch Vergil, which I find to be the most effective besides round trips. Phase 3 is triggered around 30% health. Once again, there will be a dialogue exchange between Dante and Vergil to signal the phase change. Phase 3 is mostly identical to Phase 2, with the exception of the following 3 changes. First is that Vergil will spawn the doppelganger whenever he enters SDT. Secondly, his ultimate attack in SDT will change, with the dive bomb being replaced with a special long attack combo. Finally, if he's caught off guard in this phase, he will start blocking after a few hits. The biggest change of it all is definitely the doppelganger. This clone will attack on its own at random pace and separate from Vergil, using a moveset mostly resembling Phase 1 Vergil. Having the doppelganger around will seriously disrupt pacing, ruining any effective strategies that you can have against Vergil. As such, it is absolutely key to get rid of the doppelganger as quick as possible. One crucial fact about the doppelganger is that he has zero block or parry capabilities. This means that any attack, gun or sword, can deal damage to him at any time. Well, that means that basically any weapon or skill are all fair game. From my experience, there are two skills that stands out. The first skill is the aforementioned round trips, and the reason is mostly the same as before. Dante's summoned swords can attack the doppelganger separately, letting Dante focus on dodging attacks. Round trips, in this sense, is the safest option. The downside to this skill is that you'll have to hold down the button first, so be prepared to jump around a bit while holding down the style button. And the other downside is that sometimes it could chase the wrong target, circling Vergil instead of the doppelganger. Or worse, at times it could miss both targets, chasing down thin air. In that case, you will have to wait for it to come back and try again. In contrast to the slow and safe round trips, a DT Stinger is the quickest option. Landing one full DT Stinger will take out the doppelganger in one go. Besides these two skills, you could also try other weapons with heavy hitting attacks, such as King Cerberus' long barrel, or some closed-up shotgun blast, preferably in Devil Trigger mode. Another thing to note is that Vergil starting his ultimate attack will cause the doppelganger to despawn. It is a possible alternative if you simply cannot take him out by yourself. As to the ultimate attack itself, it is simply a mashup of a bunch of different attack combos that Vergil uses during STT mode, ending with AJCE. In terms of making things easy, I would suggest new players to interrupt his combo altogether by parrying, which will turn him back into normal form. The easiest timing to parry Vergil in this combo is when he teleports in and do an upper slash. Using Balrog's Flint Wheel or a DT Stinger, you could easily parry Vergil and end his combo right there. After that, Vergil will once again revert to normal form and be vulnerable for attacks. The only difference here is that he will start blocking attacks after being hit a few times. The key to breaking his guard here is to deal a higher number of hits or heavy damage. Both seems to work from my experience. The easiest way to break it is to use a DT Stinger. One Stinger is guaranteed to break his guard. Besides that, most attacks in Devil Trigger mode are also capable of breaking Vergil's guard. Whether this is due to the added hits from Source Formation or the increased damage in Devil Trigger mode, I am not sure. One special case is King Cerberus, where it has a couple of attacks that can bypass the guard altogether and deal damage directly to Vergil. The most damaging one would be Hot Stuff, using Swordmaster. Finally, if you feel like making things even easier, you could use STT to finish Vergil off. The timing I would recommend popping STT is after Vergil drops under roughly 15 to 20% health, where using 2 Demolition in a row, then ending it with Judgment, would be enough to take out Vergil. And that's the end for my tips and strategies for this boss fight. I've condensed and shortened a lot from the original vision for this guide in order to keep it within reasonable length. I hope that it is still understandable for new players, and I will try my best to answer any questions, so feel free to write them down below. The rest of the video will be a demonstration on this boss fight using the aforementioned strategies. I wish this guide has helped you learn new things and enjoy DMC5 more. Thank you for watching.
I won't lose to the likes of you, little brother. You wreck! Lightning! And you're set free.
Take this! Trick it! Fired up! Retreat! Fired up! Take this! Fired up! Let's just bounce out and settle this. That's right. Come on. Cut you down. You wretch! How boring. Prepare to die. Eddie never did this. Cut off your own son's arm for this?
My son means nothing to me. I won't lose to the likes of you. Foolishness.
And you are set free.
Now I shall give you death in return.
Fired up. Just about time to settle.
That's right.
Come on. Son's on for this. Nothing.